Hello, good morning, good afternoon, singulares, and everyone that is joining us today. Thank you for being here. My name is Montserrat. I'm the director of Singular Creative Labs, and today discussion, we have a special guest today that is Matilde Docci. I would like to introduce her properly as well because she have an incredible background. So before we dive into that topic of today, that is novel food by design, navigating regulation and innovation, the number 83 of our singular open talks, let me tell you a little bit about Matilde. So I did a little bit of homework here, Matilde, so because it's impressive, your experience. So Matilde is a leading consultant expert in international food law and regulation, and she has an impressive international career across Europe, Asia, and North America. She has worked across private and public sectors, including FAO, French and Japanese governments, NGOs, global consultancy firms, and multinational companies. Her expertise covers different range of topics and very relevant for today's discussion. That is the future of food. So alternative proteins, novel foods, sustainability, regulatory compliances, environmental claims, and all that because she's helping companies to navigate through this complex world of food regulations and make it easier for everyone. She advised a range of clients from startups, VCs, research centers, and governments. And as I said earlier, she does all the regulatory risk, due diligence, and to making sure that the product can enter in the market without any issues. She holds 2 masters in law, international trade and investment law, and food law. And she also have a diploma in food psychology. So a very, very solid expert we have here today with us. She's also regularly speaking in industry living events, and like Future of Protein, the IT Food Summit, Plant-Based Food World Expo Europe, and I could continue. And of course, we have the pleasure to have her with us today here on our singular topics for today. So pleasure, Matilde, to be with you here today.
Thank you so much, Monse, for the kind introduction, and I'm ready to answer any type of questions for the audience.
Yeah, so I have been preparing a little bit of different topics because I fully understand that can be a very complex topic for people that we are not familiar with the law and the regulations. And as we have very, a great variety of people in the community of Singular, I think will be great. Maybe we can start with a little bit of the regulatory trends and the challenges. But maybe I thought maybe before jumping into there, it will be probably good to to define the topic of today, novel food. So what will you understand, and how is the real definition or the formal definition of novel foods?
Okay. So novel food is a specific type of food category. When we look at it from a legal point of view, certain food categories, they are legally defined. For instance, like milk is from mammals. It cannot be like, for instance, soy milk, for instance, or meat has to come from an animal, and so on. So novel foods is a concept that originates from the European Union. And in the European Union, it's defined as any food that has not been consumed before the 15th of May 1997. And we have about 10 categories of novel foods. So for instance, like insect-derived ingredients are novel foods, cell-based products are novel foods, certain plants can be also novel food, and traditional food from third countries, so outside the EU, can be novel food as well. For instance, like chia seeds, they were considered a novel food before they entered into the EU, and they have to be approved. So a novel food has to be either already authorized on a positive list in the European Union, is called the Union List of Novel Food, or a company needs to submit a dossier to showcase the food safety of the product. and the authorization is valid across the 27 member states. And once the product is authorized, it can be sold across the region. And the concept of novel food also has been adapted in other regions, like for instance, in Latin America, only Brazil has a definition, and they don't work with the landmark date. I think it's around 20 to 25 years that the food has to be consumed, otherwise it's considered no food, and then you need authorization. In the US, it's under a broader concept that is called GRAS, generally recognized as safe, and it's any food substances that has not been consumed before 1958. But in the US, it's a little bit specific because actually approval is optional. You can very much, as a food company, put the product on the market without the product being assessed by the Food and Drug Administration. So that's the Food Safety Agency. And the novel food concept also exists, for instance, in Australia, New Zealand, in Singapore, Thailand, and even in the GCC region. That stands for Gulf Cooperation Councils. Like, for instance, like Saudi Arabia and UAE, United Arab Emirates, they do have a definition of novel food, and usually it's around 20 to 25 years of proven safe consumption by humans, otherwise is considered novel food.
Wow, quite complex. I would say. One question you mentioned in there, and I should, if I understood correctly, you say as well in the US you could eventually put it in the market without
Mm-hmm.
being yet having that approval, GRAS approval,
Yeah.
and yeah, and it's, so what is the, I will say, what is the risk, right? Because probably if that is not getting the approval, as a
Mm-hmm.
company, you are facing a big risk in there. Or
Yeah.
can you put a little
No.
bit on that?
Yeah. So if I have to compare with another region, like for instance, like the EU system is based on pre-market monitoring. So the rationale is like any type of food is unsafe until proven otherwise. So this is why you have like novel food or food additives or GMO derived products that required approval prior to being sold. Whereas in the US, the system is based on a post-market monitoring system. So we consider that companies, they do their due diligence process and they have no interest putting a product that is unsafe on the market. But if it turned out the product is unsafe further down the line, then they are exposed to legal disputes, and this is why, even though approval is optional there, it's very unlikely that a company will put a product on the market that they are unsure whether or not it's going to be safe.
I
But the
guess.
system is different. And also the rationale is like in the EU, we put consumers first, whereas in the US, it's like business first, hoping that businesses, they won't harm consumers.
Okay. Yeah, I guess yes. There's a big risk as well, probably there on reputation damage,
Mhm.
and then for the brand or for the company, I guess as well. Um,
Exactly.
Yes, talking about the regulations, and you mentioned there are different regions, right? So the regulation change, and that is the challenges always, right, in this sector. I mean, regulation changes across the region, but not only within the regions as well. I mean, across countries in Europe, you may as well apply different regulations. So, in your view, what are the biggest challenges companies are facing when introducing those novel food or alternative ingredients
Mhm.
like a protein, alternative protein that now is quite, trendy.
Mhm.
So yeah.
So lucky for us in the EU, everything is harmonized. For instance, if a novel food can be sold in Spain, it means that it can be sold in the 26 other member states. Where it's a little bit complicated is, let's say we have an authorized novel food that might be a plant, but history of consumption shows that only like the stem has been consumed, and the company would like to then derive an extract from the leaf, then you need to submit a novel food dossier. Or what you can do is to prove that it has been consumed in one of the member states before the landmark date. And you do that by doing what we call not a novel food dossier, but a novel food consultation. Because on the UN list, your product is not mentioned, And there is also another thing, like another resource that we use, that is called the Union Catalog of Novel Food. So, and this is the foods that are in a gray zone, in the sense that they are not on the list, but it doesn't mean that they are also novel food. And the way to make sure that they are not is like by submitting a consultation in the member states, that the member states that is consulted will then assess the information submitted by the applicant, showing that it's not novel. And they are also going to discuss with the other member states to see if they agree. Um, so once the decision is made whether or not the product is novel food, it's actually given by the European Commission. So it means that if Spain assessed a food that turned out to be novel food, you cannot go, for instance, to Portugal and argue that Spain didn't do a good job. You have to do this. But in terms of challenges, it happens sometimes for more technical novel foods, like for instance, like cell-based meat, that once it's authorized, a company can ask for 5 years, 5-year period of exclusive use. So it means that the applicant that submitted the authorization and got the approval can prevent any companies for a period of 5 years to sell the product, even though they might comply with the specification of the product, for instance, like heavy metal residues, like salmonella, like content, and so on. So companies, they have to make sure that, first of all, if it's novel, that is on the list or on the in the catalog, and if it's authorized, that the authorization is not actually for a company for a period of 5 months. If they want to commercialize that product that is protected, they need to ask a licensing authorization from the applicant. And for instance, for plant-based protein, one of the most recent cases is mung bean protein isolate. So mung bean is a traditional pulse, but the extract, the protein isolate, is considered novel foods, and the company Just, that is making a product that's called Just Egg, alternative to egg, owns the exclusive use until 2028 or 2020, 2026 or 2028. But in any case, like the companies that would like to also commercialize mung bean protein isolates, they cannot do so in the EU, except if they get the authorization from Just,
Mhm.
or they have to wait until the authorization period of exclusive use expires.
Yeah. So on that topic, you mentioned about the different companies and the regulatory challenges. So they go through all that process. I guess, do you have any example of companies that what are the challenging in the sorry the challenges they are facing when submitting, like, we have these days like the insect, the cell cultures, and so on. So any kind of cases where you see that company went through the process and then there was eventually a challenge and they have
Mhm.
to withdraw, or making changes on their processes, or changing on the way they were positioning the food in the market.
Mhm. So you have different ways to have authorization not moving forward. It's like, first, you submit the dossier to the European Commission, and they have to say whether or not the dossier is valid. So it means that you have to provide a set of information, for instance, like a flow charts, like toxicological studies, and so on. And if in each category you don't have all the information, then the dossier is going to be dismissed, and the company can submit the one that is completed. So if it didn't pass that first stage, it doesn't mean that the product won't be authorized. It just means that they didn't provide all the requested information. If not, you can have some delays in the what we call the risk assessment phase. So it's not done by the European Commission. The European Commission does something that is called the risk management. So whether or not they're going to actually grant the authorization. The risk assessment is assessing the safety of the product and is done by EFSA, the European Food Safety Agency. And in theory, EFSA has 9 months to assess the safety of the product, but sometimes they need a little bit more information about certain parameters that were not asked in the first place, but are important for the agency to make sure that the product is safe. For instance, let's say you are making microbial protein. So it's a dry product at the end, but then EFSA would like to know if the applicant has data on the water that is not in the product anymore. So you can have an assessment that takes longer than expected because of that. And then lastly, once the assessment is done by EFSA, it's up to the European Commission to do the risk management phase. So whether or not they're going to authorize the product. And it can happen, but in very rare cases, that actually the European Commission decide not to approve a novel foods. And in that case, the company has to start from the very beginning by submitting another dossier. But when a food is not authorized, they will also get justification and clarification. And for instance, a product that do not seem to be authorized is anything cannabis derived. But the main reason is not really about the safety as a food, is that a substance can be either a food or a drug. And the authorities, they consider that is a drug, so you cannot put it in food products.
With products. Yeah, we have a question. Probably we can take it later on, or and then we continue, or maybe just is because it's relevant to the topic now. Someone is asking us, could be considered a novel food a non-ingredient like potato is used to create the product, but the process is different. So therefore, the final product is different from the others in the market.
Yes, because it relates to unknown production processes. So the landmark date, the 15th of May 1997, also relates to the production processes that were used before that date. But it would be for something a little bit more technical. For instance, if you would make like extract something from a potato, like a food additive or like a protein ingredients or something like that, and then so most likely it's novel foods. But if that extract is considered not novel food, but you use a method that is completely different from the one that is mostly used, then it could be considered novel food.
Okay, so hopefully that is answering the question. And just on the same topic, because we say, right, there is a lot of challenges in there, but as a food regulator or lower, you will change a food regulation today that can help, startup companies or normal companies to foster innovation. What would it be that, you're talking about EPSA, you're talking about as well the US FDA and so on. I guess there is a lot of processes in there and time that you need to wait. What is in your view as well, what will be the changes that your food regulation could make today?
It would not be directly in the regulations, but rather in the documents that we use to help with the assessment process. So it's something that we call guidance or guidelines. And we need more support on the risk assessment part from the responsible authority. So EFSA, for instance, at the moment can only advise within its mandate. So, for instance, if they are asked what type of information I need to submit to showcase that the novel food is safe, it would be, you need like allergenicity test, like genotoxicity and so on. But at the moment, EFSA is not able to answer a question like, what is the best testing method I can use to make sure that you're going to agree with my result? but we already have some progress. Like the guidance was updated this year after some consultation last year, and there is also special support for SMEs, small and medium enterprises, because it's a lengthy and costly process. And in order to enable like fair competition, we like the authorities, they dedicate more support to smaller companies.
Small companies. That's great. So talking as well about, because I'm conscious of the time, this is a very interesting topic, and probably we can spend a lot of time, but I want to make sure that we cover a key a quick question that I thought will be relevant as well for the audience. So we're talking about regulations, but at the end of the day, all these regulations are there for consumer protection, right? As food
Mhm.
safety. Um, so where do you think as well food education plays a big role, right, in the consumer trust and adaptation of those novel foods? So like nobody knows there is a milk or is no milk. Is a burger vegan or is meaty or is not meaty? So in your
Mhm.
view, what else should be done as well, to educate consumers?
Mhm. I think more information on why food processing is not something to fear. There has been a lot of noise in the past month about ultra processed food, but consumer, they know for a fact that, for instance, like chips, they are not to be consume in the same quantities as, for instance, like bowl potatoes or things like that. And the fact that a product has e numbers or food additives, I don't think it's a problem because it can enable you to have products that last way longer, and also that are safer for you. You have stabilizers like preservative and so on. And food additives, they can enable us to keep food for much longer. And also, fortification is something good for certain products. If you want to, recently I also worked on edible cuttings. So this is like, for instance, like wax that you put on fruit and vegetables to make them last longer, and they are considered a food additive. But I feel like it's not known by consumer, and I think it's a good thing if you can, if you are short in time. For instance, you are buying carrots, and without, you would need to cook them within 2 days, and with the edible cutting, then you can give yourself a little bit more time, and also to prevent food waste.
So it's a little bit more about the transparency, right? About all those ingredients, and so in a consumer language, I guess as well.
Mhm.
Um, I want to make sure as well that we touch on so I will say probably educational campaigns, labeling, nutrition labeling. There's a lot of, noise right now as well about the labeling. Nobody can read the label and understand if the protein content or anything like that. What else do you think that could be done in there?
I think just simply looking at the back of the package with the nutritionals, there is a lot of confusion with Nutri-Score, for instance, like choosing like a system that calculates like a grade for you. But if you really want to know how much fat or how much protein there is in the food you consume, you just look at the back of the package. And also, one is written like could be a portion of your food intake for the day. It's actually referred to like an average consumer. I think it's like 2,000 calories. But you have
Mhm.
like tools that you can use online to see, like for instance, as a teenager, like how much do you need, and also if you are more active than your peers, that you need to eat more, and things like that. Like there is more information available that we think. It's just, I think it's the space is just too noisy to take a step back and then to see what is already available for us consumer to make more informed purchase decisions.
Yes, I guess probably education and school as well will help as well in that, right? So people are,
Mhm.
since you are a little, you're trying to understand, the products that you are consuming, right?
Yeah.
And having the opportunity to have you here as well, right, is about due diligence. So you're helping a lot of the companies to do that due diligence as well on their products. So for those investors and all those businesses,
Mhm.
um, what are the biggest regulatory kind of red flags, or you can say watch outs, that they should have, they should be looking at,
Mhm,
to avoid like any, withdrawal from the market or lawsuits.
mhm.
Any examples that, based on your experience, well, like recommendations for the people in the audience to make sure, when, apart
Um,
from probably hiring you as a consultant as well, that you can help them.
Whenever you receive information from a supplier, they have to be able to tell you, what is the applicable regulation. It's not enough to say it's compliant with US or EU food law. They need to tell you like which piece of legislation applies, and that you can also you have to ask them if you can use it for certain applications. And if it cannot give you a statement or confirm that, for me, it's a bit of a red flag, because if you are selling me, for instance, ingredient that is only used in pharma, like for instance, like soy lecithin can be used in shampoos, but also in chocolate, to avoid that the paper like stick to the chocolate bar. But let's say if soy lecithin was only used in cosmetics, and then a supplier tell you, oh, it's also food grade, it's safe for food. It's like, yeah, but how is the substance like categorized? Is it a food additive? Is it an ingredient? Like how much I can use it, and so on. And when I do due diligence for investors, and I have to assess most of the time like innovative products, I always ask them what is the regulatory path, and if the startup cannot tell me, or they just put numbers that are a little bit too optimistic. Like for instance, if they tell me it can be on the market in 1 year, and I know for a fact that the authorization process took two, then I will ask them like more questions. And sometimes you have also to realize that especially startups, they do many things at the same time, and they are not necessarily trained on a specific matter. So you also need to ask them if they understood how they come to this conclusion about whether or not the product is authorized, and also how much you can use, and so on. So my best piece of advice is not because a product is on the market that is necessarily compliant. When working with suppliers, always ask what are the applicable regulations, and also if there are any limitations in terms of usage.
Yeah. I'm conscious of the timing. I mean, we could be talking here a lot. I want to make sure that we have a little time for the final question, but maybe we have 2 more minutes, I guess. So
Mhm.
if you maybe just put, I would say, a case study, something that you know from that have worked, another one that they have failed because they didn't do the due diligence. You have
Mhm.
any kind of well-known cases as an example, so people can learn from that.
Um, so due diligence like problem, or I think it was also a lobbying issue. There is currently something assessed that is called soy legumoglobin from a US company called Impossible Foods. So it's derived from genetically modified soy, and technically, it could have been assessed as a novel food, and they tried to submit a dossier for that. But actually, it's being assessed under genetically modified organism regulation, so GMO. And so that's an example regarding that the classification in one country, for instance, in the US, it was under GRAS system that also covers GMO, novel food. Doesn't mean that if you want to get approval in another country, the same regulation will apply.
Okay.
And sometimes you will have also novel food status in one country and not in another one. So to be very much aware of what are the limitation in the country of destinations, that might not be the same in the country of origin.
So I guess before launching into or entering with your product in new market, make sure that you do as well the due diligence. Doesn't mean because you are in a market you can launch your product in a different market as well. We have 1 more minute, I guess, so we are very much on time. But before, and we could continue talking. Before we go, and as we close it, as I said earlier, this is an ecosystem of people working on the whole ecosystem of food, right?
Mhm.
Um, if you could give a piece of advice working on them on those novel foods, even just not the ingredients, because I say it's important. You mentioned earlier the processes, what it will be in one day, to make sure that the product they scale up and they are not getting surprises when launching to market or expanding.
So regardless of the jurisdiction, I would look at whether the jurisdiction I'm in has a positive list with novel food that are authorized, and if there is any type of landmark date to make sure that the process that I'm using was used before that date. If not, there is a need to dig a little bit deeper and to also realize that it might be considered novel food and then approach authorities. But in my experience, you have many companies that decide to do the due diligence process in-house and only decide to involve authorities if necessary. So this is why you may have certain production methods that seem to be very innovative, but actually very simple, like one that was used before. And whenever a product is on the market, always look at the ways the product is used, and if it's subject also to exclusive use period.
Okay. I'm not sure if there's any final question from anyone in the audience. Otherwise, I think we are very close to pass the time. Any other questions? No? Okay. So with that, Matilde, thank you very much for your time and sharing with us all those insights. We could have talked for more time, but the audience can reach out as well to you, or reach out to us, and we can put you in touch with you. So thank you very much again, and
Thank you so
bye
much.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.